Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the 12 Talk podcast. My name's Josh, here with my co-host and podcasting partner in crime, Mitch. We have got a brand new series coming at you today. This is the Seahawks season review series. It's episode 1, and we're kicking it off with a bang. So we've had this gentleman on before. He's a face in the Seahawks podcast industry. He's a BBC broadcaster. He writes the Seahawks draftblog.com, sometimes controversial, always very informed and always very measured in what he thinks. And like I said, we had him on for a mid-season review and it was absolutely fantastic. So we've got Rob Staton, who's going to be popping on for us very soon. He's going to be going through things like, how did Mike Mac do in his first year? Standout players, standout plays, rookie class, a host of other things. If you've got any questions or comments, please pop them in. We'll try and get them answered by the end of the pod. But before I start, Mitch, how's everything going? Got a good week?
Really good, mate. Yeah, really good. Doing my absolute best to swerve all the lurgy that's going around at work, because it seems like everyone and their dog has had something horrific so far in 2025. But I'm very good. I'm really enjoying the playoffs so far. I think we've got a real fascinating set of matches and a really interesting route to what could be a real interesting Super Bowl this year, because I'm not convinced the Kansas City Chiefs get there, and I'm really, really enjoying the idea of something different shaking out this year and the 49ers not being there.
Not that we're smug about that as Seahawks fans at all.
No, not even a little bit.
No, but I mean, we've got plenty of off-season stuff to be coming up as well. I can't wait. You've got all your rookie stuff that we're going to be looking at, all the draft prospects, which I'm placing firmly on your shoulders. Because that's your bag, my friend. That is your bag. For those of us that are joining, thank you very much. If you haven't, please feel free to like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, share it with your friends and family, share it on social media. And if you'd like, you could also pop into our Discord. Now, the Discord is free. The master of the Discord is right here. We've got a fantastic group of Seahawks fans from all over the world, and it is growing continuously. You can find it's the pinned post on our X. Also, Mitch will be popping that link in the comments throughout this pod. But without further ado, let's hit the intro and we'll get Robin. Welcome back, everyone, and welcome, Rob. Thanks for coming back.
Hey guys, yeah, pleasure to be back. Always good to talk Seahawks with you.
You've been doing it a lot as well. I've seen a lot of pods that you've been on recently. I've been getting me through my working day.
Yes, well, it's very busy at the minute. The day job and this is definitely keeping me very busy at the minute.
I was going to say, well,
I've had about 2 hours sleep this week. So yeah.
So you're a parent as well, so you should be used to that.
Yeah, well, thankfully they're a bit older now, so I can kind of let them. I just leave them to their own devices, and they do what they want. They're 11 and 7, nearly 8, so not too bad.
I've only got a few years to wait. I mean, without further ado, let's just get straight into it, because, like I said, you're a busy man. You've been doing a lot of these. Mitch and I would like to ask you a few questions, and hopefully you've not come across all of these. For anyone who hasn't seen Rob on the other pods, you can check him out on multiple. He's been on the Hawks on Rundown. There's quite a few you've been on. I can't even name them all. Obviously, your own.
Yes.
Who else should be? Go on. You can give a shout out. I'm more than happy for people to check it out.
Puck Sports. You do the Puck Sports one every week, every Wednesday, and I've been on a few. But the main ones to check out is my own, which is Rob Staton Football on YouTube. So go and subscribe now and help the channel.
There you go. If you need to find the link, it is in the comments and the description down below. So let's get straight into it. Rob, how do you think Mike fared in his maiden voyage as a head coach of the Seahawks?
I think it was fine, but only fine. They didn't beat anybody particularly good. All of their wins were against average teams or bad teams, with the exception, obviously, of Denver. And that was Denver's first game of the season on the road with a rookie quarterback playing his first NFL game. So there's a bit of an asterisk toward that. They beat the Rams at the end, but that was Rams minus a string of key players. So a 10-win season that really feels more like a 9-7 season to me. That last game, I mean, I've not been that bored in a long time. I just wanted to get it out of the way. And now they can move on. So they've got some serious improvements to make. But the good news is that they've done what they needed to do. They needed to make a change at offensive coordinator. They're now trying to find a new one. That's stage one. And then stage two will be to fix the offensive line.
Which is going to be the big thing that we're going to be watching on bated breath to see what they do. Whether it's going to be drafting someone high profile, which we'll get onto after, or it's going to be a big free agent move. Personally, I think, as disappointing as it was for us not to make the playoffs, a 10-7 season, I can quite happily get on board with that. With a rookie head coach, with a team that wasn't his own, someone that the team he's inherited, and looking at the draft, I don't think all of those players were his choices either. So this offseason will be the start of him really building his squad and his team. Speaking of the season, Mitch.
Yeah, Rob, was there a moment in this season that really stood out for you, negatively or positively? Was there a defining moment in our season that you could put your finger on?
Well, there was no big win. I was really hoping that they would beat a really good team. Have a sort of a victory that you'd feel obliged to go and maybe watch again during a boring summer day, or even just watch the highlights when you've got nothing to do. I don't think they've got a win like that. So I suppose the highlights for me would be probably just the emergence of Leonard Williams as a great force. Seeing some of the games that he had, the pick six against the Jets was a fun play. And that sort of 3-game stretch where he was pretty much unstoppable in that period was a highlight. And then from a negative sense, the Giants loss was just horrendous. And it became worse with every passing week because the Giants just got worse and worse and worse from there. And you made the Giants look like a playoff team. So, I think that was the biggest disappointment for me. And they've clearly got a lot that needs to be fixed. Yeah, I think John Schneider's under a lot of pressure this year. I think if he doesn't fix some of these issues, he's going to be in bother. I don't think he's on a particularly long leash at the minute. And they have got to become the kind of team that, one, can win games at home again. Big games, not just we're playing an awful team like the Skylar Thompson-led Dolphins. That's a win. It has to be that you can beat the Packers at home and the Vikings at home, and you can beat the Niners at home and the Rams at home and stuff like that. So they need to get back to that kind of a team. And I mean, they're a million miles away to being a more competitive team than they've shown the last few years, but they are quite a long way away from being the kind of team that be playing this weekend with a realistic chance of making the Super Bowl. So they've got to keep taking steps forward. And that starts for me with becoming a team that is great in the trenches. And that's what they've got to do. It's off season. So over to you, John.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think for me, there was a moment in the middle of our season where we cut Dodson and we went out and got Ernest Jones. And I know picking a standout moment of the season that was off the field is a bit odd, but with a lack of, like you say, a sort of benchmark win that really stood out, I think that was a real key indicator that Mike Mac isn't afraid to be really cutthroat, especially on the defensive side of the ball. A lot of the really cutthroat decisions that we saw in season were the defensive side. We saw draft picks at corner that were cut and didn't even see any play. We saw players that we picked up in free agency on the defensive side cut and replaced. I think that showed a real sort of high conviction cutthroat attitude from Mike Mac, and that stood out this season for me, that he wasn't afraid to do that, and also that it was supported by John Schneider as well. I mean, we saw his draft picks getting cut and free agency targets removed. I'm sure John had a lot to do with that, and he backed Mike Mac to sever them. So I thought that point that really stuck out for me.
Yeah, it's a couple of good shouts there. And I think that definitely the change in the linebackers and the turn that created was a big deal, because the defense looked as bad as it did in the Pete Carroll up until that point. So seeing that sort of take a step forward was a big positive. Still think the defense needs more. I still think there's room for a really disruptive defensive lineman to add to what you already have. I think whether that's an edge rusher or someone who can complement Leonard Williams, I'm not sure, but I do think sort of those edge areas you kind of always left. I mean, I am anyway. Derek Hall's a good player. I think Boye Mafe is a good player. They're not great players though. So can you add something to the edge there that is going to terrify teams with Leonard Williams inside, hopefully Byron Murphy taking a step forward. So there's still work to do for the defense, but they did definitely take a turn after that trade. It felt like a big moment.
Yeah, I think it was just the benefit of having a linebacker who could command that defense. I think that's what Ernest Jones does. He walked in that building and instantly seemed to have the confidence and the leadership qualities that really galvanized that defense. And he clearly conveyed the message that Mike Mac was trying to convey before he even got there. With that, we're talking about Ernest Jones. You've spoken about Leonard Williams. Who was your standout player? Was it Leonard, or have you got anyone else in mind?
Yeah, it's Leonard Williams. I think he's the best player on the team. They've not had a player who can do what he can do in... I don't think they've had a player like that since I've started following the Seahawks, and it's been a couple of decades now. So, somebody who can just destroy things from the interior. I mean, for a defensive tackle in Seattle to get 11 sacks is practically unheard of. It makes you wonder how many more he could have had if they'd have been playing the way they did in the second half of the season on defense. The first half, he maybe could have pushed up towards 15. So I think to have him playing that way is just fantastic for the Seahawks, and to have a player who teams will have to game plan for every week. It feels as if they've needed that for such a long time. So he is, I think he's the best player the Seahawks have, and very grateful to have somebody who can do what he can do.
Yeah, agreed.
I wish he was 25 though.
Yeah,
that is the issue. I think it's the age. Unfortunately, I think this season's belied his age, and I think the way we've used him has been transformative to that D line, where we've moved him around. We've been able to use sort of Jonathan Hankins at nose, then Byron Murphy, Jay Reed's actually come in and done some stuff as well. But it's all allowing Williams to do what he does best, which is get to the quarterback and disrupt. I do agree with what you're saying about the edges. I really like Hall. I like Mafe, but you have to remember they're second round picks. They're not top tier edge rushers. Whereas if you have someone in there that genuinely terrifies a defense to garner more attention, then perfect. With that being your standout, who surprised you the most? Which player on this roster, whether it be a rookie or someone who was already there, surprised you the most this season?
I mean, it surprised me that Christian Haynes was so bad and couldn't get on the field.
It surprised all of us.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, not to expect him to start necessarily, but certainly to not be below LeMayer, and for them to say, well, do you know what? We'll let LeMayer take the rookie lumps this year and get that experience in the bag instead of Christian Haynes suggests that there's not a great future for Christian Haynes. I think, I don't think anybody surprised me that much. I suppose Tyrese Knight probably played better than I would have thought was capable for a rookie. But what I'm going to say for this answer is that I think it's a nice surprise to see not only Abe Lucas play the number of games that he did, kind of went into the season wondering whether we'll ever see him again. He played most of the games and seemed to be doing all right. So, not amazing or anything, but seems to be a player that, once again, touch wood, we'll go into the next training camp with Abe Lucas as your sort of unchallenged right tackle, which I think is a great thing. And yeah, I'm a bit surprised that we're sat here in the middle of January with that as a possibility.
I mean,
yeah, you mentioned...
For me, go on, Mitch.
No, you go, mate, because I was going to move it on to the next one because there was a nice little segue into the next bit. But you go and say...
I'm going to break your segue then. For me, the most surprising player that I was pleasantly surprised with was Zach Charbonnet. I think he really stepped up every time K9 went down. So the stats on the season we had 1,627 rushing yards. K9 attributed 573 of those with 7 TDs, with an average of 3.8 yards. Charbonnet had 569, 8 touchdowns with an average of 4.2 yards. Now, whether that was because he was a better scheme fit, there's a big conversation to be had about, do you extend K9? I know he's got a lot of lovers, but I get really frustrated with him constantly looking to bounce something outside and try and go for the big run, whereas he's not just taking what's given to him, which Charbonnet seems to have that. Put your head down, hit the gap, and then if something opens up from there, take it. And that's what I like to see in sort of a hard-nosed running back. I'd love them to be a sort of, I think Mitch and I have said, a 1A, 1B option, depending on the package. But Charbonnet really surprised me. I think he really showed what he did at UCLA this season. And it's going to be a really big headache for a lot of people now in that coaching staff, especially when the new OC comes in. And that's something we'll talk about after as well, Rob, who their preference is based on what their scheme's going to be.
Well, yeah, I think Charbonnet's made a case to be the starter for 2 reasons. One, he did play well, and 2, he's not very good as a change of pace back. Every time he goes in as the number 2, he doesn't do anything. So I think you're better off playing to their strengths a little bit. Charbonnet more as that hammer and getting the sort of the tough early yards, and then Ken Walker maybe coming in, you manage his snaps a little bit more, and he provides some electricity. And I don't think they're going to do that, because I think they took Ken Walker very early in the second round and probably want him to be the starter, quote unquote, and that they want to sort of unleash him in a way that he's not been unleashed so far. But I just don't think you're getting the best out of either of them. And maybe if they were going to create the double-headed monster, they should have thought more about the types of backs they were drafting, because to me, Walker's big and explosive and quick. He's a different type of runner, but then you've got another big explosive back in Zach Charbonnet. You know, the Lions have got David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. They're very different players. They complement each other well. It almost looks with Walker and Charbonnet as if they both need the same kind of role.
And then you've got Kenny McIntosh as well at RB3, who I was a big fan coming out of college. I thought he was fantastic. He's a great pass catching back as well. And every time he's come on the field, he's shown glimpses of what he could do in college, just obviously with his measurables throughout that sort of pre-draft process and the draft at the combine. He fell so far down draft boards. I think we were lucky to get him where we did. And that's just another span in the works there for K9 and the sort of K9 lovers, that you've got the 1A, 1B of K9 Charbonnet, K9, and then wait in the wings, you've got Kenny McIntosh, who's not commanding a lot of cap. And when his rookie deal comes up, do you sign him for minimum? And he can be your RB2 with experience and more sort of snaps played. So I wanted to get your take on that, but the most surprising one. I needed to throw that Charbonnet nugget in there as well, because I've been dying to tell someone else, and he's someone that I'm really going to be watching interestingly in the next few years.
Yeah, it was an interesting look. I thought that this year Charbonnet started looking like the back that we drafted, and I think JSN started looking like a first-round wide receiver as well. So, but those two obviously were taken early in that same draft, weren't they? And they're suddenly looking like what we envisaged them to be. But I do still think that we utilised them slightly incorrectly. But that's all part of the scheme and the poor play calling we saw this year, I think. Rob, you mentioned Tyrese Knight as a nice surprise. What was your overall thought on our rookie class?
Well, I think Byron Murphy had a somewhat underwhelming first season, given that he was sort of surrounded by players who did quite a lot. So, taken just ahead of him is Brock Bowers, who is an elite star player at his position already. Just behind him, you've got a Jared Verse, Chop Robinson, people like that who really had fantastic seasons. So because of that, it's quite easy to sort of look with a tinge of disappointment. What I would say to that is I don't think he was ever the player that I think some people start to think he was, that he was going to be this sort of game-wrecking interior defensive lineman who collected loads of sacks. That's not what he is. he's far more likely to be a Christian Wilkins type over the next few years than he is to be an Aaron Donald or anything like that. He's more like Grady Jarrett and Christian Wilkins for me. And if you watched him on tape at Texas, he was very good at sort of, he could get down on a knee and leverage and then drive people and hold position and absorb blocks and sort of connect things up the middle. He was not a big sack guy. He was not a quick swim, rip, get into the backfield. So I think really you might want to get used to this version of Byron Murphy a little bit, that he might always be somebody who anchors the middle rather than necessarily blows up the middle. So I don't think it's probably, he probably underwhelmed a little bit based on the expectations, but this is probably what he is. Then obviously Haynes has been a big disappointment. Tyrese Knight has played well above expectations as a rookie. I think credit to him, credit to Mike MacDonald. I wasn't a massive fan of the pick, but the tape was the tape. You can only go off what he was showing in college. And in college, as Chris Spielman was saying before the draft, he was like a dog let loose in a butcher's shop. That's how he played in college. And in Seattle, he's far more disciplined than you'd expect. So I think it's his credit. AJ Barner, I think he's the reverse of what everyone expected, in that he's quite a decent pass catcher, showed a decent blast of athleticism at times, but his blocking is terrible. So he needs to work on that. And then I think the two cornerback picks were a complete and utter waste. I was not a big fan of Lemire, and still am not really a big fan of his. And so I think, I'm afraid to say it, kind of a bit like a few of the other drafts they've had over the years. And when you look at the Rams, who seem to have game-changing drafts somewhat regularly, it's hard not to be a little bit jealous of that.
Yeah. For me, I think it was a below average result from that draft class. I do still think there's a few players in there that could really come on. Mike Jarrell, I mean, it was kind of a throwaway pick with very high upside potential, but no one really knew how low that floor was because of the division he played his college football in. And I think we were pleasantly surprised to see him feature and do reasonably well at times. But he is a real diamond in the rough, and I hope we can turn him into something, because it's a good story. But in general, I think that draft class might sort of become a bit of a damp squib, to be honest. But
you just look at, the Rams are a good example. The Rams have lost Aaron Donald, and you think, right, well, that's the end of that defense. They have nothing at cornerback to speak of. They let Ernest Jones, basically gave him away for a ham sandwich without any ham in it. And then, we'll just go and draft Braden Fisk and Jared Verse, and then pair him with, Colby Turner and Byron Young, and all of a sudden they've got this really active pass rush. And then, we've drafted Cooper Kupp, not with a high pick, and he's been brilliant. We'll just go and take Puka Nacua now. Their ability to find running backs, Karen Williams, it's hard to look at the Rams and understand why the Seahawks have found it so much more difficult, with so much more draft stock to spend, by the way, over the last few years, than they have, just to find these special players. The players that are going to come in and not just be, they're pretty good. The players that you might see in a trailer for the start of the NFL season, the kind of players who you want to have in Madden, the kind of players that other teams think, I wish we had him. And I'm not really seeing any on this roster that, people could go, Devin Witherspoon's a good player, Leonard Williams is a good player. Is anybody sat at home thinking, I just wish we had Devin Witherspoon on our team? I don't think they are. But plenty of people will have watched Cooper Kupp in his best years, or Puka Nacua now, or Jared Verse, and thought, oh man, I wish we had that guy. So that's the tough thing with it.
Yeah, I think the main comment that I hear and sort of see, this whole draft class, I mean, a lot of hopes were pinned on Byron Murphy being this destructive force up the middle, and Leonard Williams has just completely taken that off him. And I'm not sure if it's going to happen, especially when you've still got Jaron Reed there as well, taking up some of the snaps in the position that I think Murphy would prefer to be playing. Whether that carries on next season is yet to be seen. But the main conversation about this is that every pick that we've taken, especially in the last draft, it's just squad depth. Like you said, there's no one there where you go, that's an incumbent starter, that's a superstar in the making. After his rookie season, you can see exactly what trajectory he's on. I mean, just some of Mike Gerald, will start from the bottom, essentially the last pick. He allowed 3 sacks off 250 snaps. Lemaya, 2 sacks off 358. And then you've got Christian Haynes off his 167 allowed a sack as well. And they weren't outstanding numbers. The O-line's an issue anyway, but then you've got the DJ James cut. Pritchett had one of the worst. I think he had the worst, or if not one of the worst, rookie coverage grades in this whole class.
I don't know why they drafted those 2 cornerbacks. I mean, look, I know cornerbacks in a need. That's probably what it was more down to. But as soon as those picks came in, I was like, nah, there's better players than them available.
And then you wheel out an aging Artie Burns, veteran, and he performs miles better than both of them. You know, I think it's they got Pritchett. I mean, we've got one Auburn cornerback, and then James was sat there, and they went, "Oh, now what? Let's get his running mate, see if we can form a tandem with those two." It just didn't work. And Tyrese Knight, I think Tyrese Knight and Barner are my 2 favourites out of this whole draft class. Sorry, I'll rephrase that. Mitch's boy, AJ Barner, as he called that pick. I'll say it every single time we mention his name. And I think Tyrese Knight, that's right, Tyrese Knight, the more he plays next to someone like Jones, the better he'll get. But is Mike Mack going to see him as the future? If a linebacker comes up in this draft that he really likes and knows will fit his scheme, will they draft him and then just that'll usurp Knight? And that's the level of player we're looking at. He's been good for where we drafted him in the 4th. If we get someone in the 2nd who's better, then in the pecking order.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, it's just really hard to sort of look at the play. Sorry to go back to that. If you look at the players who were available to the Seahawks in the 5th round, who they could have had instead of Nehemiah Pritchett.
Are you about to hurt my heart, Rob?
Well, there's a lot of names. I mean, maybe I will mention one of the players that you're after. But between that pick and the Lemaya pick, you have got the likes of Cedric Van Prangranger, who shouldn't have gone in the 5th round as a centre. Just to chuck it, they needed a centre. They signed one in training camp. You know, why not just bring him in? Austin Booker, the defensive end for the Bears. Chris Abrams-Drain was a good player. He's a cornerback. He went to the Denver Broncos. Spencer Rattler was drafted in the 5th round. You know, if you wanted to take a quarterback, you know, they often accused of not taking enough of them. You could have had him, just a flyer there. Why not? Brennan Jackson, I interviewed him pre-draft, playing for the Rams. Really good pass rusher who could have added some quality depth there, given that you had to trade a pick for Trevis Gibson, for God's sake, you know, a few months later. Eddie Ulofoshio from Washington, who went to Buffalo as a linebacker. Dominic Hampton from Washington, a safety, who went to the Commanders instead. Jacob Monk, a center that I liked, went to the Green Bay Packers. Tyrone Tracy, who has had a great spell for the Giants, was a late 5th round pick. And then even if you look in the compensatory picks, you had Kitan Oladapo, a safety gunner, the Packers, really good player. Trevor Keegan, a guard, went to the Eagles. I mean, the Eagles tend to know what they're doing when it comes to linemen. You know, these are all players who are available, and it really pissed me off actually at the time that they took Pritchett, because I just thought, you've got all of these available talents. Why have you taken him? And having seen him play, stand by everything I thought about that pick.
I think after that 4th round, the draft just became a bit rudderless. With Mike MacDonald not having any time to look at the combine or do any of his own scouting, it was very much left up to the scouts and Schneider. And they got the interior D lineman, they got the interior O lineman, they got the linebacker, which I think Mike Mack might have gone, I can work with him, and then AJ Barner, the tight end that they probably needed. And then after that, I think it was just, who's on our board? Has anyone got anything written down for this guy? What about this guy? Well, we'll take him. And then that's the Auburn cornerbacks. We'll take Pritchett because we kind of liked him. And then who's left? The DJ James pick, and we go, well, we'll take his running mate because they did all right in college and see what we can make out of that. There was nothing really.
I mean, they did it. I mean, the thing is with those guys is that my sort of redeeming memory of the cornerbacks that we drafted from Auburn was they gave up that stupid play at the end of the Iron Bowl on 4th and 79 yards to lose the game against Alabama. Like, there was nothing about them that made me think I can understand why they've done that. Really, it just. They must have just thought we need cornerbacks. The talk on the street was they had 4th round grades on those guys, but they were just better players out there. Like, and I appreciate Tyrese Knight and AJ Barn have done all right, but passing on Malik Mustafa for those guys, like, come on, man. It's just, you're watching him playing for the Niners and even the TV broadcast going, they've done it again. The Niners, they found another great guy. And you're thinking, I interviewed him. It was obvious on tape. Go and get him, and they let the Niners get him. So
it was a great interview as well. I mean, he was one of those that Mitch had pegged in our sort of pre-draft pods. Mitch called out a lot of those names as sort of late round picks, and the fact that we just completely overlooked them really got to me. And I think this is where I'm hoping this season Mike MacDonald gets to have that conversation with the scouts and Schneider and say, look, we can't have the same as what we had last year. You didn't pick for anything other than just panic picks. We need to actually fill out a roster the way I want it to be filled out with the right kind of players.
Well, there's a lot of pressure on John. Like, he has to get. He's not had a game-changing draft in a long time. Like, he had 2 drafts during the Russell Wilson trade period, where he drafted a lot of players. And if you want to pick through them and go, well, he was a good pick, then fine. But when you have a lot of picks, you should be doing well. You should be getting good grades for your drafting. When he has a normal set of picks, we're having average or below average drafts. And this has been going on for a decade now. So he needs a game-changing offseason. His free agency was awful last year. His draft was average. You can't have another one of them. If they have another one of them and they're another 9 or 10 win team next season and not making the playoffs, John Schneider won't be the GM of the Seahawks anymore.
Agree.
I think that the seat is heating up for him. Before we get to sort of the next couple of questions for you, as the UK Seahawks official podcast, we do like to give them a shout out during our pod. So as the official podcast of UK Seahawkers, you can join the UK Seahawkers for there's £12 for individual membership or £20 for a family membership for up to 4 people in the same address. Anything outside the UK, it's an extra £5 postage. You get access to some fantastic giveaways. You get some 10% discount at the pro shop. You're eligible for game day field passes, and you get some lovely goodies with every membership. This year we got our throwback goodies. We got our wristband, our patch. You get your membership card, and this year we've got an RFD card. There's always something a little different and individual in there. And we have a meetup. It's now confirmed in Glasgow. It's at Admiral's Wood and Waterloo Street on the 3rd of May. If you'd like to join us, some are members of our Discord and the UK Seahawkers there. If you're not a member, just get yourself in there. You can pay by PayPal. Come and join us. It's £5 per person to go and attend that and be with Seahawkers from around the UK, meeting up in the beautiful city of Glasgow. So massive shout out to the UK Seahawkers. Thank you so much as well for everyone who's joining us. If you haven't and you're new to this channel, thank you very much, Rob, for bringing all these people along. You can feel free to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell to stay up to date. Rob is the first guest we've got on our post-season Seahawks review series. We've got some other great guests coming up, including Bryce Coops from the Hawks Zone Rundown, who I know, Rob, you've appeared on their pod as well. Awesome guys, good friends of ours as well. And they're also members of the Discord. In fact, we'll be speaking to Bryce on Saturday evening to do the same thing to see what his opinion is. The Discord link will be popped in our comments as well by Mitch. So if you want to join, it's completely free. Talk to Seahawkers from around the world and great community that we're building there. Right, let's get back onto these questions, Rob, as now you've come into the middle, sandwiched in between, I'd say a rose between 2 thorns there, to be honest. But
Mitch didn't like that.
Yeah. All right.
I want to know which one I am.
Thorn, 2 roses. Fine. All right. Put me down some more. What do you think are? We've addressed the draft. We know that was a failing. What do you think the biggest failing of 2004 was for this season?
The offensive line. I mean, no, actually, I'll change my answer to that. The biggest failing was Ryan Grubb, because it's his responsibility to make a bad line not as bad as it was. I mean, just you have to show incremental improvement there to the point where it's not holding you back as often as it was for as long as it was. He didn't really seem to. He felt a little bit like he was struggling to keep his head above water throughout the whole season, and it's a shame. I don't really have a negative thought on the process for the Seahawks. If I could think back to last year, I think we all. I mean, I can't speak for you two, but I think most Seahawks fans were sort of just consumed completely by who was going to be the head coach. And then once Mike MacDonald was appointed, you kind of like, oh, right, oh, yeah, they've now got to go and get the coordinators.
So I really,
and then, they're kind of looking around and it's like, well, they might speak to Chip Kelly. And you're like, oh, God, really? And then it's like, well, they might speak to this guy and they're going to speak to this guy. And none of them got the juice flowing. There was nobody there who you thought, go and get him. So they give Grubb a chance, didn't have a problem with them giving him a chance. It didn't work. It was obvious that he and MacDonald didn't see eye to eye from about the Giants game. And it was. I actually am a bit frustrated that they didn't, now that he has gone and what's come out has come out, I'm a bit disappointed they didn't do it sooner. If they'd have done it sooner and just said to Jake Peace, go and have a go at this, they might have actually had another win on the board, and that might have got them in the playoffs, and you would have had a chance to test out Jake Peace in the job. So I think that's the biggest disappointment for me, is that they got that wrong. However, give Mike MacDonald and the Seahawks credit. They could easily have just tried to carry on. I get the sense it was so bad that there was no chance of that. But they have moved on. To turn the page. Good for them.
Yeah. I think the Grubb experiment was frustrating, I think, for all of us. I've said it on multiple pods. It just seemed like every week Mike Mac had that conversation with him of run the ball, play complementary football, don't have our defense on the field all the time. But Grubb just, I don't know if he was too headstrong or cocksure and went, oh, you know what? I'll run my game, thanks. And just let Geno throw the ball so many times that he ends up with 15 interceptions.
Yep.
And it wasn't conducive to winning football. We won 10 games, fantastic. But we could have won more if we actually played that complementary football that Mike Mack keeps talking about. And we gave our running backs the ball more to eat out the clock, to make those yards, to give our defense a bit more of a rest. And I think that's the main reason. Like I said, they didn't see eye to eye. That much was obvious. I'll commend Mike MacDonald for being as mature and diplomatic about his answers when it comes to why to let go of Ryan Grubb as he has been, because he could have just turned around and gone, he just wasn't the right guy for us. He just didn't listen to what we wanted and decided to play his own game. But instead, he's kept all those comments behind closed doors, and they parted ways on good terms and whatnot. Oh, Mitch,
he did
cite,
cite,
you want to say something?
Yeah, no, he did at one point cite creative differences, and I thought that was really interesting, because I'd wondered whether Ryan Grubb had kept resorting back to or leaning upon what he knew rather than what had been agreed. It felt a little bit like he had a comfort zone calling certain plays, whereas what had been agreed that he would build at Seattle wasn't in his comfort zone, but he'd backed himself to be able to provide that for Mike Mack. But when push came to shove, and the plan that had been drawn up wasn't working, he just resort back to what he knew, which was not at all what Mike Mack had agreed with him. That was my take on it. But then there was a very large sample size of what was being drawn up, especially on first drive, initial drives, was just so far away from what was ever going to score you points. So I think in the end, calling it creative differences is a very polite way of saying that Grubb just couldn't get done what Mike had needed him to do and what had been agreed that they would put together. So that's my take in the end.
Agreed. Now, the next lot of questions, Rob, are purely for you. No input from us.
Okay.
Mitch, I believe you've got the next question, my friend.
Yeah, you'll like this one, as you're such a gleaming light of optimism. Usually, Rob, what are your reasons to be optimistic moving forward? What have you seen this year that gives you some sort of optimistic sort of seeds that may have been planted this year? What do you think?
Well, I think the fact that they're getting a new offensive coordinator gives you some cause for optimism. There's no reason to be negative about that. We'll see what the offense looks like with a new person leading it. So that gives me some optimism. I think the defense certainly took a big step forward. So can it take another step forward? They're going to have another draft. They're going to have another free agency period. It's not all going to be about the offensive line. So can they add a bit more talent to the defense and take another step? I would say that's a cause for optimism and probably the state of the NFC West. The Rams, fair play to the Rams, who were bloody brilliant last week and against the Vikings, and you've got to doff your cap to them for that. But they do have a very old quarterback that, Cooper Kupp is getting up in age now. So if they're the team that you're chasing, they won the division at the end of the day. I don't think it's not like looking up at the Niners like it was 3 or 4 years ago. The Niners, what are they now? The Cardinals are the Cardinals. I think they always will be. Every 15 years, the Cardinals will have a good season or two, and then they'll go back to being the Cardinals. So there's not a real. You're not in a loaded division anymore. So you need to win one more game than the Rams this year to make the playoffs and win the division. So next year, can you be the team at the top? There's no reason to believe that they can't. So I guess there was the reasons for optimism for me. And Jackson Smith and Jigba's emergence, I think, is going to be fun to watch next year to see if he can take another step.
Nice.
Okay. So with the off season now upon us, for Seahawks fans anyway, who are your top 3 cut or trade candidates?
Cut or trade candidates. So the first cut candidate for me, if I just try.
You've got a list written down.
I've got I use over the cap, and it's pretty useful at a time like this. So Draymond Jones is the obvious first one because he's been bad for 2 years and he's too expensive. So I would move on from him, and I think it's a draft where you've got players with a similar body type to him. So I think you can replace him for a lot cheaper in the draft. So Draymond Jones would be the first one. Roy Robertson Harris would be the next. His snaps just came way down at the end of the year. You are on the hook for $6.6 million there. So he's not. He may be back with the team. I don't mind him coming back, but he's going to get cut first and then brought back, unless they sign him and lower that. But it just seems like an unlikely thing to do. They'd more like to cut him and then maybe talk. And then I'm really, really torn on what to say. I know what I'm going to say. Tyler Lockett, obviously, is the next one because it's just he can't be on a $30.1 or $31 million cap hit next year. So he's going to be cut. He's been a fantastic Seahawk, but I think everybody knows it's the inevitable end now.
Ruthless. I love it.
Fair enough.
There's 3 questions left for you. And I'll take the next one. Then, Mitch, you've got the last 2, my friend. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
So, Rob, what is your 3-point winning formula to success in 2025?
Rebuild your offensive line. That would mean free agency and draft. I think you need 3 additions to the offensive line. You're definitely going to need to bring in a left guard who can start. Whether that's going big and spending money on somebody or drafting someone like Tyler Booker, you need a left guard. At center, you've got to have competition there. Like Oliver Timmy at least needs to be competing with a veteran, or a reasonably high draft pick if it was like a Jake Majors or somebody like that. I don't know if he said if he's declaring or not yet. So I better check that one out. So you're going to need to add some competition at center, and I think you need to add something at right guard as well. I don't think you can just go into it and say, "Well, we'll have another bash with Anthony Bradford, Lemire, and Haynes. You've got to have somebody in there who can start ahead of those guys, even if it means we're going to shift one of them to be a backup left guard or a backup centre or something. I think you need 3 additions on the offensive line. So that's the first thing. The second thing, they need to get the offensive coordinator appointment right, I guess, is an obvious one there. And then the third thing is to add a high upside defensive lineman who can potentially be a game wrecker. Because you're not going to draft, like, one, there isn't, that player's not in this draft. There's no like unbelievable have to have Myles Garrett who's going to be there for the Seahawks. There's not. But there are players in this draft who are going to go in round 1, 2, or 3 who are traits-based players. They've not perhaps played their best football yet, but they've got the potential to be very, very interesting at the next level. So if we're talking purely about success next season, I think it's investing in somebody who you can add another weapon to that defensive line, who can just give that pass rush another notch or another nudge forwards.
Yeah, real difference maker. Nice. Okay, well, you briefly mentioned the decision on OC. Have you got a preference amongst the? I mean, we've heard second interviews announced for Fraley and Kubiak as well. Have you got a preference?
I've been quite encouraged by the names. You know, I think I am very positive about the people they've spoken to. It's a bit like last year. There's not a great list of options. There's no go and get him type person here. So there's also hardly anybody with play calling experience. So it's really difficult to sort of know, to root for anybody, let's say. It's hard to root for one candidate. But I think Clint Kubiak makes some sense because he's been an offensive coordinator. He's called plays. He's from the Shanahan tree. And, you know, I think that offense is proven to be very, very good, very effective. I like the way that he speaks. I've listened to interviews with him. He says all of the right things. I can well imagine him and Mike MacDonald. They seem very similar people. So, you know, they could mesh. His dad, Gary, had a lot of success in the league. And maybe he's a chip off the old block in that regard. And then, I think he's somebody who it's very easy to say, yeah, that's fair. That's fair enough. That's a solid appointment if it's him. With Fraley, I mean, there's talk that they want to have another interview with him as well. Obviously, they can't do anything with that until they know whether he loses at the weekend. So if they lose to the Commanders, which I'm going to say now, I don't think is out of the question. By the way, like the Lions they've lost Zeitler for this game. You know, that's another injury. They are so powerful, so prolific, but then the Commanders have just got this bit of magic to them, haven't they? You know, and they've got that quarterback. He's a bloody player.
They've been great to watch this year.
Yeah, they're a fun team, aren't they?
Say it, but when you look at the facts, they've got someone who's our potential head coach candidate, and didn't get him, and Bobby Wagner's gone there. Yeah,
I mean, listen. What I would say is, I don't regret either of those things. By the way, like Dan Quinn, great guy, whatever. I don't wish he was in Seattle. I mean, he's succeeding because, he's built a great staff. I'll give him that. But he's succeeding because Jaden Daniels is there. Like if he had, I think Gino there, I don't think they'd be any better than Seattle, let's say. And Bobby, bless him, you know, has had a great career, but he seems to go somewhere else after leaving Seattle, play quite well. When he's been in Seattle for the last 2 seasons in Seattle, it's been painful to watch. So I don't know if that just gives him a little kick up the arse, you know, when he goes somewhere else and he wants to prove a point or something. But he did get run over by Baker Mayfield last weekend.
He did. That was
back to the point though, is that with this game, I think it's either going to be like a blowout win for Detroit, or it's going to be really close and the Commanders win. And if the Commanders win, they can meet with Hank Fraley on Monday if they want to, or Tuesday. You know, they could meet with him very quickly. The problem is if they keep winning and they get to the Super Bowl, you ain't going to be able to meet with him until the week before Super Bowl week. So that's a lot. I mean, that's another, what are we talking about? That's another 2 weeks away from next Monday. So that's how can you afford to wait that long? Because if Clint Kubiak gets a job between now and then, he's gone. And then if Hank Fraley, if they lose the Super Bowl and Hank Fraley turns around and says, I'm coming back to Detroit. I want to win a Super Bowl before I leave. What do you do then? Ryan, come back. What are you going to do? So it's quite tough for them to. I think what they will do is they will probably see what happens this weekend, and if Hank Fraley wins, or if Detroit wins, Hank Fraley might be off the ticket here. They might just give Kubiak the job. If Detroit loses, then they might go back to him. What I will say for Hank Fraley is, if you bring him in, it will be a commitment to the O-line, and everybody likes Detroit's offense. I'm a bit cautious about how he is as a play caller, but I've watched an interview with him, and the guy is a great communicator. So part of me wants him to get it purely for the fact that he seems like he'd be a cool guy to have as your offensive coordinator. So
we all thought that about Grubb, though.
Yeah, I'm not speaking after the fact. Like, somebody messaged me, I know somebody who would know, let's say, and they said that Grubb was a very divisive figure. That he wasn't for everybody, and I won't say some of the other words that we use, but they. Let's just say I'm not surprised that it hasn't worked out, because he's not for everybody. He just isn't. And I think in the college game, you can perhaps be a slightly different personality than the pros. So
fair enough.
And the last question, I'll throw it over to Mitch, but this is his favourite subject. And I know with you, with SeahawksDraftBlog.com, this will be one of your favourite subjects as well. So Mitch, fire away.
100%. Right here, I want you to commit. Who were the Seahawks picking at number 18?
Commit.
Assuming there's no trade back and John Schneider's not, trading back into the second round or something horrible. Who do you think is the most likely player to be the 18th pick?
I've not even had the combine yet.
Yeah, well, that's true. Not even a Senior Bowl, combine.
I just want a name. I've got a name, but I want to hear yours.
I will give you a name. If apologies, if you just wanted a one-name answer, then you've gone to the wrong topic, I'm afraid. But what I will just say quickly is the answer to this question will probably determine on a few things. Most importantly, who the coordinator is, because if you appoint Hank Fraley as your offensive coordinator, the Lions have a very different profile of offensive linemen than the Shanahan guys. So the Shanahan, it's more of a zone. Now look, Sean McVay's got the same system as Shanahan, and he's ripped it up and started again with big hulking offensive linemen. So that's always a possibility. But if you were going for pure Shanahan blockers, they're very different zone blockers compared to what the rest of the league is doing right now. So that would shift my opinion on this a little bit. I think the name I want to give you is the first person I scouted, or not the first person I scouted, the first person I wrote a scouting report for last summer was Tyler Booker at Alabama. He's a big 325, maybe a bit bigger even, pound offensive lineman, 5-star recruit, captain, the heart and soul of Alabama, such as it was last season. They have a bad offensive line except for Tyler Booker. He's the only one who played well consistently this season. And he's not going to be Steve Hutchinson, I don't think. Few people are. But what I tell you, I think he will be, is he'll be somebody that you can trust to play week one in an NFL season and not be overwhelmed. Christian Haynes struggled and he doesn't look like an NFL player, to be perfectly honest. His body shape, and I said this before the draft, I liked him, but his body shape was not typical with an offensive lineman in the NFL. Tyler Booker's an NFL offensive lineman. So you'd have to pay $20 million a year for somebody who's an NFL offensive lineman these days in the free agent market. Tyler Booker would be a lot cheaper if you draft him at 18. So I think there's a lot of players that I could give you as a name there. I'd love to run through about 10 for you. But
I'm happy for you to do that, but Josh might tell me off.
Come on, we're time constraints, sir.
Tyler Booker's the one.
Tyler Booker's my guy as well. I put a little tweet out the other day with the little green Post-it note that was screwed up on draft day, and I've changed it to Tyler Booker no matter what and I posted it, and I thought just early doors got that one out there. I love him, and I think if we take an O lineman that high, I want to see someone that's going to give something to Ken and to Gino. I don't necessarily want to see a pure pass blocking specialist. Sorry, but pass protection specialist. I want to see someone that's going to enable the run game to flourish as well as protect Gino. I think he is exactly that guy, and I think he'll go in the region where we pick. So, OC, conditional. Obviously, what we're looking for will change depending on who we get. But I really do think looking at the hole we have and what he fit and the hole he fills is a perfect match for me.
Yeah, and he finishes his blocks. He takes people to the turf. He's a finisher. Yeah, I've said this to a few people. I want to set a bar stewards up front. I don't want finesse. I want aggressive, angry, physical,
nasty pieces of work.
So give me Tyler Booker because he finishes. And there's a few offensive linemen that finish. There's a few that just hold. And I don't want a hold position. I want someone who's going to send you to the turf.
Love that.
I like it. Well, there ends our questions for you, Rob. Thank you so much, because we wanted to speed through those last ones without a lot of interjection from us. Before everyone who's joined us, thank you so much again for everyone who's tuned in. It's been great having you on, Rob. For those who don't know where to find you, do you want to tell everyone?
Yeah, so seahawksdraftblog.com, and there's lots and lots on there. Some may say too much. And then on the YouTube, it's Rob Staton Football, all one word. So if people are listening to this and they could subscribe to that and check out seahawksdraftblog.com, that would be massively appreciated.
Awesome. And let's not forget on X at Rob Staton as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you go on there though, at the minute you're going to hear a lot about Sheffield Wednesday. So
maybe not just now then.
Yeah, you might want to avoid that for now. But check back in a week or two, maybe. But I'll at Rob Staton, all one word on it. And can I just say, thank you. It's great that to see a UK based podcast doing well and getting some good people on. I'm not talking about myself there. I'm talking about you saying you got Bryce on this weekend. So it's really good to see, and I've really enjoyed the two visits so far.
No, thank you for being the first guest for this the Seahawks season review series. Like I said, we've got Bryce on Saturday. Hopefully, Dan Viennes, Clinton Bonner from the Seahawkers podcast. We've got some of the German Seahawkers going to pop on. And we're going to have a round table with some of the 12s that are in our Discord as well. So if anyone does want to join that, feel free to click that link. But I'd just like to once again say thank you so much, Rob. I know your time is very precious because you're a very, very busy man, as we alluded to earlier. Not only as a BBC radio host, but also Seahawks journalist, podcaster, the lot. And we follow everything with great intrigue here, so we just really appreciate you coming on.
This has been one of those weeks my wife's just kind of like shaking her head, saying, "What are you doing? Like another podcast, another video, another. What are you doing? Like just rest." And
I get that too.
I've got Monday off, so that's my next day off. So
bring it on for Monday.
Well, you see, the thing is like when I think of a day off, I think that's an ample opportunity to sit and write something. So I keep saying we need to go away. We need a holiday, but we're gonna have to wait. We have to wait for that.
Oh, mate. Well, thank you so much again for coming on. Thank you to everyone who's tuned in. We've been the 12 Talk podcast. I'm going to make sure I point the right way. That's Rob Staton. You can follow us on YouTube, X, Insta at 12 Talk Pod. We've also got a TikTok for any of those US viewers. I don't know how good that's going to be for you till Sunday or whatever that is. But we'll be back on Saturday with Bryce from the Hawks on Rundown. Feel free to like and subscribe to this channel. And I just want to finish this with another thanks again. And go Hawks.
Go Hawks.